Hello, everyone. This is Sanjeev Mohan. I am joined by my frequent collaborator, Rajesh Parikh. And today we want to parse what is going on in the space of AI agents. Welcome to this edition of the It Depends podcast. It is my pleasure to have Rajesh back on. Rajesh, so great to see you.
Happy to be back again on your show, Sanjeev.
Thank you so much. We have so much stuff going on that we couldn't wait to record this. We want to talk about current news, what's happening in the world of generative AI these days, what's working, what are the issues with agentic, what enterprise strategy and skills are most essential so enterprises can focus on. So we've got a very wide topic that we are going to parse in the next few minutes. So with that, I am going to get started quickly. We have a lot of stuff to talk about. I want to talk about the burning question these days. Investors are asking this question: is AI slowing down? One of the reasons was because this MIT report came out that said 95% of projects have no ROI. We've gone through the report, we've talked to some experts, we've parsed it. My personal opinion is I'm not convinced that this is a thorough study, and I think there are many different ways of looking at it. So it's because it's from MIT, it got a lot of attention, but it is something I would not share with my readers, my audience, because I don't think it reflects the reality. Rajesh, any thoughts?
No, I think, we've seen before this Gartner as well talking about 40% of the projects would fail. And this one talks about even a much bigger number, which is 95%.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at what's going on, and this is not new to this technology, we went through this in internet era where there were a lot of skeptics. We went through this in the cloud era where, in fact, most of the enterprises did not want to get on with the cloud in the early days,
Yes,
right?
correct.
So I think this is just the tussle between the skeptics and the optimists. Having said that, the hype was above all of us, and a little bit of a reality or tempering down of a hype is good for everybody. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, at one end, you have this overhyped agent washing going on. At the other end, there's a reality that the enterprises need to move fast.
Hmm.
So, in some ways, the truth is somewhere in the middle of these two extreme ends.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what we want to do. We don't want to sort of marry ourselves to one of the ends, which is like very hyped, and
Yeah.
or the other end, which is very pessimistic in a way.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll talk more in detail as to what some of the challenges and action plans are. Nvidia announced its blockbuster numbers. It blew away expectations, but the stock went down. And the reason is because the market has come to expect that 50% of the growth is going to come from, they expect that every quarter the growth will be 50%. If it was, I think, 46% or something like that, and the market said, oh my God, AI is slowing down. Then there's this whole issue about what chips can be exported to China, and that's like another $2 to $5 billion of revenue that they're sitting on. So that led to more things. There are more benchmarks. Every week we see a new model. I have a few of these listed here, and it's just reaching a point where it seems like all the models are being trained on similar data. They do similar things, and the benchmarks are not showing leap of expansion, but it seems incremental. Some new models
Yeah.
that came out, OpenAI launched GPT-5o, and that was a messy launch. Actually, it's a very interesting thing we learned. We learned that models are not like applications where you have a new version that comes out, you deprecate the old version, everybody moves to the new one. People have formed attachments with like GPT-4o, and it's like you have a dog and your dog is aging, but you have a strong emotional bond. Somebody, without telling you, replaces and gives you a fitter, finer, younger dog full of energy. and you say, no, I'm sorry, I want my old dog. So anyway, so there were lessons that were learned, but I think GPT 5.0 is a game changer in one sense because it has this router that figures out based on your requirements, is it a reasoning model I should call, which is this thinking model, or is it the faster model and the accuracy trade-offs? So there's a lot to talk about. It's not a topic for the day, so I'll move on. Meta, Microsoft, Apple, they've been Meta's Scale AI partnership is starting to fray a bit. Some of these 100 to $250 million hires, we're starting to see that it's not aligning well. And then they're signing up these partnerships. So Meta's future in AI is in quite a flux this week. Google launched some pretty amazing models. And Rajesh, this is something we will be actually talking about because what they've done is in Google Gemini 2.5 Flash, you can now edit changes into a video, and some of the videos it is producing has this memory. It knows that in the past these videos would generate frames and had no notion of what had transpired before, but these videos are now getting really smart and you can edit tiny pieces of it while keeping the rest the same. So some of this is using a lot of agentic technologies that we talk about today. The last thing that we wrote here is that mergers and acquisitions are still not happening that rapidly, and there's this whole aqua hire. We saw that with OpenAI trying to buy Windsurf, and then that fell through. But the founders of Windsurf ended up in Google. We see AWS and other companies, instead of doing an M&A, they just acquire the talent. Some of this was in a relic from the past because the previous administration in the United States was not that keen on these M&As, but it seems like there is a lot of talent being moved around instead of M&As. That may change, but once again, I want to get to our topic of the day, which is agents and agentic architecture. Who's making money in agents and who's challenged? So, Rajesh, over to you.
I think the few applications that have moved ahead and are doing well. One is of course vibe coding.
Yep.
Uh, Coding in general
Mhm.
has turned out to be one of the best applications so far uh, for for startups who are in that segment. Also, it's brought in or lowered the bar on how fast can you get these code out. Let's say build applications, get out. So vibe coding has been a term that's becoming popular around that. It's bringing in people who are not the traditional software engineers back into the fold of creating something, right? So it's expanded the canvas of people who can code potentially. So that's been doing well. The deep research is another one that has become popular. It reduces the amount of internet search that you do. It summarizes it for you, so on
Yeah,
and so forth, right?
deep research. Yeah, deep
Uh,
research.
we should technically call it deep search,
Deep
but
search.
fundamentally it kind of boils down to internet search, scraping, and coming up with some report, presentation, so on and so
Yeah.
forth, right? So that's another one that we saw a bunch of tools doing pretty well there. We saw customer service as a segment generally less complex, more around the complexity is more around the TCO, the costs per call per minute, so on and so forth, the real time, those kind of stuff, but not necessarily the agentic. Uh, there's usually a simple workflows there, so that's sort of taken off. There's still a lot more work there, but generally speaking, that's taken off. We're seeing simple agentic workflow automations sort of doing well. Uh, uh, I mean, these are done in multiple ways, um, but largely sort of uh, LLMs are nodes in a typical traditional DAG or a workflow, essentially, right? So those are the kind of applications that are doing well. Clearly, what is it? sort of challenging. It's trying to take on the earlier IVR systems. It's trying to take on the traditional rigid software workflows that we built over years, simple RPA automation that we built, right? In rigid constructs. Those are the things that are getting challenged. Of course, coding as a task, a lot of people are questioning would people need to code or systems would code, right? Obviously, the truth is still in the middle, but it has anybody who can really control and find the ability to use these tools. These are pretty powerful options on the table today for getting applications out, so on and so
So I put analyst firms here because
forth.
because that's one of my pet.
Oh, actually, there's a lot of discussion around would McKinsey's kind of consulting be as premium
Yes.
now, right? Because a lot of this work is possible with deep search today.
Correct. So
Uh,
McKinsey, yeah, I that's a great one. The reason I put analyst firms on top was because Gartner stock went down over 50% in a matter of few days, and basically this is something amazing. Gartner changed the very organization I used to belong to's name. I used to work for something called research and advisory. It's not because what's working is research, so having the old way of doing research is challenged. So now Gartner's Research and Advisory has been renamed as Business and Technology Insights. And Gartner launched a AI agent to ask questions called Ask Gartner. Although I have not used it because it's only open to Gartner subscribers.
Actually, that's one of the things that we've not put here. But the old kinds of conversational bots that existed, they are getting replaced with agentic bots, essentially
Hmm.
conversational bots.
Okay, we should go add that. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So now the question that begs is, why are these areas challenged? Like, what are the issues that agents have not been able to address? So let's look at the issues. So we divided. We got four categories of issues. We divided these into technical and non-technical. To some extent, it is a good old people process technology, and we'll go through these in more detail. But at the highest level, we'll look at two things: model learning gaps and agent loop. So these terms may sound a bit vague, but I'm not going to steal Rajesh' thunder, so I'm going to leave it as it is right now. And then if I go to the next slide, then in the non-functional, we look at the process gaps and the organizational issues. So with that, Rajesh, I'm going to go to the first technical challenge or issue, which is the model learning gap. So what is the gap that we are talking about here?
Yeah. No, I think this is an important topic, and I think there's a lot of traction here. I mean, all of us are hearing more RL of late, reinforcement learning. But if you actually have to put a little bit of a background to what's happening, is if you go zoom back a year
Hmm,
and take a snap of it, we were all talking about the fact that foundation models are going to lead us to AGI in a couple of years,
hmm,
which means what we were basically saying is these generalized models will become so potent that they could potentially, with a little bit of a wrapping around, be able to do most of the tasks that humans do, right? Now, clearly, that those general capabilities that started with ChatGPT, where we could find these models answer interestingly, intelligently conversational things, and subsequently this year we've seen significant improvement in instruction following in a multi-turn kind of a setup. We have seen models reasoning capabilities improving significantly. We've seen tool calling becoming a lot more mature compared to what it was last year, right? Now, all of these are clearly drivers for the agentic needs
hmm,
as to why should we be, and clearly the market was moving in saying, hey, just conversational applications are not good enough. We need models to actually act and do the real world task, right? So we got them in this year. However, what is also happening is we are also learning that the chain of thought reasoning, all the generic capabilities that we had are not good enough for the task specific needs that we have, right? Now, think about it. Uh, if you go back in time, we had this specialized models also being built where we had models from Google which went and won the chess competition, which and these were specialized models,
Yeah,
right?
International
But
Math Olympiad. That was a big
Math
one
Olympiad, yeah.
recently.
So
Yeah.
what is happening is we've been oscillating or we've been talking about two kind of journeys. One is these generalized models, which look like grad models. They go win the coding competitions, but are pretty bad at doing day-to-day work, for example,
Mm.
right? And then there are these specialized models which have been trained for that specific task and process. And they can do that well, but they might not be able to do other things well, right? So between these two spectrums, as the economic opportunity for models is moving towards agents,
Yeah.
we need a specialization layer to fill this gap. And that is really what this topic talks about, which is that how do we fill this learning gap where the models need to actually reason on tools output, not just be good at the generic reasoning, right? There is a tool integrated reasoning we need.
Yeah.
Secondly, these models need to work for a really longer horizon of time to complete the task. It is not about simple conversations anymore,
Mm.
right? So you see a little bit of a softness when these task specific agents they go beyond, let's say, 6 7 turns, the whole thing collapses, uh, right? So these are the gaps where we today struggle with, and the solutions that we're working on. One of the solution is how do we fill the learning gap, essentially, and this is really where the RL comes on top. You have strong base reasoners, and how can you now take them to work and make them better at learning for in the environment that they need to actually work,
So
right? I mean, just take an example.
yeah.
Let's say you want a model to do data analysis task. Now, this model needs to be good at understanding the organization specific data. For example, the sales data that you have, it needs to understand what are the important, interesting business questions that it needs to be trained on, just like a human in a way,
Mhm.
right? And what RL does, it brings this specific learning on top of these already good base learning into the agentic reasoning, essentially.
Yeah, so very, very cool. So this is so the gaps in the model itself, and then the next thing we have is this go a little bit into what you just talked about. So do
Yeah.
you want to say a few things and then we move to the next?
Yeah. So I think the diagram just depicts what we just discussed, which is that the 1x6 are really the LLMs that we talk about. The 2x6s are, hey, can this model at least do better on, let's say, one topic, legal or medicine or whatever,
Hmm.
right?
So
So that the
one-on-one
amount of
model.
customization,
Mm, yeah.
yeah.
So
So
these are
these are very
one-on-one
high,
model, 201 model. Okay.
yeah, like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Same as the learning construct that we have in universities and even in corporates, essentially. And
Yeah.
the 3x's are expert models, essentially agentic model. They're good at the specific task and have been trained for that task, that specific task, essentially. Right.
Are
So as
there
you go higher on the value, you go lower on the customization. As you go lower, you need more training.
so
That's really what.
Rajesh, we were talking a few days ago. Alibaba came up with Coder with a Q, Quoder, and
Yeah.
then also out of China is Manus. Are
Yeah.
these, where would you put those models? Uh,
They still don't have the learning gap piece.
yeah,
They're still very soundly crafted agentic loop, which is the next topic we have to talk
yeah,
about. They
agentic.
have
Yeah.
done well in feeding the models the
Mhm.
right amount of information that they need to continue doing long instruction tasks.
Yeah,
It is not to say that they have replaced the base model. Maybe some of them have, but not yet. This is still something that, and that is why you see that most of those agents are built for generalized tasks. They're still not built for enterprise
right.
tasks.
By the way, one interesting thing that I've been reading quite a bit is one of the agents that's sort of the base agent that these model companies have launched, on top of which they're building is a computer use. agent, which takes over your browser and it's able to read and even do your shopping for you. And I just saw just last week, a few days ago, Anthropic released something called Claude for Chrome.
Yeah.
But it came with a whole list of warnings. Don't do this, don't do that. So that's computer
So the
use.
2x axis that we're talking about,
Yeah,
which we have put in here, are really those the coding model, the browser
yeah,
use model, the computer use model.
right.
The idea here is there are some set of meta skills.
Yeah,
Let's say, how do you browse and fetch the information that you want, right? Now, for the 1xx or the foundation model companies, that's a gradual progression, which is that they need to move up the ladder and capture data and the feedback loop for specific large, let's say, meta skills fundamentally.
yeah.
So the browser agent that you talked about or the desktop computer use agents fall in those categories essentially.
Mm, got it. All right.
And like there's the deep search agent as well, in a way.
This is right. So that takes us to the next challenge issue, which has to do with agent loop. So let's talk about this.
Yeah. So I think just going back to the challenges, one of the challenges or one of the, I wouldn't say challenge, but first understanding what does an agent need. If you go back in time when we were building conversational chatbots, we did not have a lot of tool interfacing fundamentally. So the agentic loop was quite simple, which is that the user would ask a question, the assistant or the agent would basically in a sort of a loop environment inherit that question, put that question as part of the prompt and give it to the LLM to infer what this user asking, and then the LLM's response was given back to the user. And this would keep happening as long as the user has a follow-on question. So in a loop, and that is really the most simplistic agentic or let's say conversational chatbot loop that we were talking about, which is
So
that the agent is listening.
RAG would fall in that.
RAG was a subsequent one where you said that it's not just conversational. The can the model also answer beyond its own inherent knowledge from the knowledge that's applied to it in the prompt?
Mhm.
So what we did is we supplied in the prompt context not just the user question, but also we supplied the knowledge on which the model needs to infer or answer from, uh, and not use its own internal knowledge fundamentally. So think of it as an extended knowledge base that you're providing in the prompt,
Yeah.
right? So that was the second piece of the journey. We have not shown in the diagram here, but then we immediately swiftly moved on to the agents
Mm,
where beyond these two pieces, which is the user provided information, user provided knowledge, you also provided tools
mm.
to these models to invoke, and then the tool's output itself was then fed back in the next iteration within the prompt window,
So the tool
right?
output became the context for the next instruction.
Exactly. Just
So
like the document, now you're also getting the tools output
tools,
back in the
yes.
context.
Correct.
And you keep doing that till you've got the final task done. So
Right.
here, the requirement is you're being given a goal. It's not a question alone, it's a goal to complete a task. And
Right.
to complete a task, the agent needs to use many tools, go through multiple iterations in this agentic loop
Yeah.
before it comes to the final answer.
Yeah.
Now, at each iteration, what you're doing is you're generating this tool results and putting it back into the model's context window.
Yeah.
Now, when you're doing that, you've realized that you've not built these models for first of all the tool integrated reasoning.
Mhm.
While they become better at function calling and all of that, they're
Yeah.
still not as good enough to handle the variance of the tool responses. That's the first part.
Yeah.
The second part is unlike what happened in the previous version, the context window with every iteration is growing pretty fast
Mm,
because tool outputs can vary in terms of the amount of output. Some outputs can be very large, for example.
mm,
The modalities are also very different. For example, you could feed in a CSV output or a tabular output, or you could feed in, let's say, a document chunk potentially, or you could feed in a log output, right? Now, these models eventually are essentially next token predictors
mm.
today, right? They've not been trained for the tool integrated reasoning as well. So, and here's where we're talking about the learning gap that we talked about in the previous slide. But there's also another issue, which is that as the grounding information shifts, as more and more tool output comes in, the model is unable to figure out what to focus on. So your reasoning drifts, and eventually you see that the task collapses.
Hmm.
So you're not able to complete the task. So one of the issue and a popular version that we're now talking about is how do we manage what goes into this prompt,
Hmm.
right? So simple loop, which was earlier put what comes back into the model's context isn't working.
Hmm.
You need to now, just like what humans would do, if let's say you and I are talking and we go off track, let's say on a topic, at some point, because you and I are aware of the previous context on what is to be focused on, we come back to the original topic. So humans are good at going off track and coming back. These models treat every information equally. If they go off track, they don't recover,
Hmm.
right? So how do you make sure that as the grounding information changes, the original intent is not lost?
Correct.
So one of the thing that we're doing here is we're trying to make sure that what is fed back in every loop, every iteration of the loop is just enough for the model to do reasoning for that particular turn.
Hmm.
And this is really where what we now call context engineering, which is show the model what it needs to, don't show it everything that comes back. And that is really what is getting added and making this agentic loop a little more complex than what we've done in the past.
So we have, in other words, on the left-hand side, the big thing that came up was prompt engineering, and now it's gone to context engineering. So,
Absolutely. So
so
we are filtering for the model,
yeah,
not because they are not able to filter it. We are filtering and showing what
yeah.
it needs to see on
Yeah.
every turn,
So,
essentially.
for example, let's say in the future, I have a personal assistant agent that is reading my email. It has access to my calendar. It finds out based on some email, I have a conflict. Now it says, okay, I need to rebook your flight, but it needs to send that calendar information
Exactly.
to book my flight. So that particular context that came from the calendar agent needs to be then sent to
Yeah.
United Airlines so they can then
Yeah.
book. And then so basically that context it has to flow through from
Yeah.
output of a tool fed to the next tool. So
Yeah.
okay.
So I think you see, as humans, we can do context switches pretty well,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But many
Yeah.
of us may not be able to do it because some of us may have to write it down so that we
Correct.
can come back to the topic,
Correct.
right? So it's the same problem that that we are discovering here too.
Yeah.
Having said that, so they need help essentially,
Yeah.
and that is really where some of these newer ideas around context engineering are emerging essentially,
Amazing. That's great.
right? So
So
yeah,
next, so now we move to the non-technical. I think we've talked about some of these things.
no,
Is
I
there?
think this one we haven't, but I think this is still technical. This is the
Yeah.
second piece. This is not as important for doing a long haul agents, but it's becoming important as we go in the future,
Hmm.
which is that how can we make sure these models don't miss out what they've learned from execution.
Hmm.
Let's say you had a very good execution run, you solved a business analysis question as an agent. Now next time the same question comes, because these models are stateless, these agents are stateless, they start from zero every single time
Yeah.
because they've not learned, and so they don't necessarily follow the same trajectory that they followed the previous time for the same question. So what is missing here is the feedback loop. In the agentic loop, if we stored what worked well and what didn't work well in this particular iteration, and then we can refer back in the next similar journey that we have,
Hmm.
then we can actually have these models not repeat the mistake.
Hmm.
Uh, so what is really required in this agentic loop is how do we capture the right feedback? What is that the model should learn from every journey that it does, right? Every success that it had with a task, every failure that it had with a specific session in a specific session.
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that successes are repeated and failures are not, right?
Amazing.
And that's really what we are talking about. At some point over this next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see as we sort out the first set of issues that the feedback and learning loop will become default as part of the agentic loop, along with the memory.
That is great. All right, so we're going to go through these pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So, what are the non-functional issues?
So first issue is taming your agent workbench.
Hmm,
What's happening is as we're moving fast, there are lots of ideas, lots of frameworks, lots of evals, everything's coming. And then enterprises are stuck with dealing with so much of integration work
hmm,
and yet move the agentic goal. While that is happening, there's another issue. The old constructs around using software development lifecycle or using, let's say, ML lifecycle, both are not holding well. Because in the case of ML lifecycle, you are okay with the model generating its own inference
yeah,
every single time in a different way. And in the software paradigm, assuming you've tested well, you every time get the same output. Now
yeah,
here you're sort of in the middle. You are neither completely okay with the stochastic. You're letting the model have flexibility. They're not rigid workflows like in the case of software, but you still want to be able to ensure reliability, right? So what is happening here is we're learning how to deal with these non-deterministic outputs and still build reliable outcomes,
hmm,
essentially. And that is really what we're talking about with agent development lifecycle. They start with test-driven development. They need to have human in the loop. They need to have continuous monitoring, all tied in a seamless end-to-end process for for enterprises to have success with agents, right? So I think this is a core piece. Because
I,
we have not tied and understood this, we are seeing more failures in execution today.
are we
Uh,
seeing companies coming out with like an agent management system or agent framework or something that does this?
yeah, we've been very focused on this at our company as well, and we believe this is going to be extremely important for success of developing and deploying agents at scale
Hmm,
uh, in enterprises, and also lowering the skill bar because tying so many tools is extremely hard as
yeah,
it stands today.
yeah,
Right. So I do believe that this is the problem to solve, and we ourselves are in it, and I'm sure others would also look at this in the
yeah.
same way.
Okay, amazing. And the second issue,
The second is the data for AI. Like we just discussed a little while ago, the models, just like humans,
mhm,
need the right context.
hmm,
Uh, and if you're not able to supply the right data, let's say
yeah,
the case that you talked about, let's say I want to schedule a meeting, and the customer has asked me to schedule a meeting next week, Friday, let's say.
hmm,
But let's say if I don't have access to your schedule or calendar in the right way,
mhm,
for hey, what am I doing at that time? Or I don't have access to what was the context in which the customer is asking, is there a new person that I need to add
hmm,
to this meeting?
hmm,
Because beyond rescheduling, there's another need, let's say.
yeah,
Now, if you don't have those integrations and the context available in the form that LLMs can consume or agents can consume, you're not going to be able to deliver the agents. What we're learning is a lot of enterprises don't have data available readily or not available in the right place
hmm,
or the format in which they can be fed to LLMs. A
hmm,
classic example would be, let's say, data analyst agent, which many are trying. Now we're discovering that the just giving the SQL tools is not enough. You also need to feed to these agents semantic model, for
yeah,
example. So they also understand what are the past queries which are successful, what are the past business questions of the similar kind, so on and so forth, right? So there we are learning that semantic model is important. uh, when you're playing with these Excel agents, you're realizing that there are relations within different sheets of the Excel, for example.
hmm,
Now, how do you
yeah,
tell these
VLOOKUPs,
models?
yeah,
Yeah,
VLOOKUPs,
yeah, that you're going to be able to. So we need a semantic model with Excel too,
yes,
right?
yeah,
So
interesting,
how do you feed this data to AI? Is the context gap, and there are various needs here.
yeah,
Semantic model is one that we talked about. Data quality is another. All
right.
of that essentially.
Got it. Okay, so if we move on to the last two, so we've got, so if we want to talk about these,
Yeah. I think these are standard ones. You and I have gone through this in every journey,
yeah,
where the enterprises care about governance, privacy, security, TCO, all of
yeah,
these, right? Now, clearly, there are many sub needs here.
mm-hmm,
One is, of course, the topmost because you're dealing with LLMs is accuracy and reliability.
mm-hmm,
I mean, without that, it often becomes a no-go,
correct,
right? And
yeah,
here's something that every enterprise needs to learn, that we need to treat agents as a normal human being who would at times make mistakes.
yeah,
The real need here is how do you put the process to de-risk those mistakes? For
yeah,
example, these organization hierarchies and processes that we have created over years have been because humans can make mistakes.
yeah,
And in the agentic world, also, we will need to create those governance layers
yeah,
where we need human in the loop, we need constant monitoring, all of that, essentially, right? Because you will have to assume that these agents will go wrong at times,
mm-hmm,
right? So that's one. Who are using these? Who are prompting? What are they using it for? You want to know that,
yeah. So
right?
you need the
I
whole
mean, typical RL.
monitoring, yeah, monitoring, notification, alerting. I think those things are so much more important because these
Yeah,
models, like you keep saying, can go off track. So you
yeah,
need to bring them, you need to be alerted. So yeah,
yeah.
and what
So,
data?
what is the data being exposed?
Yeah,
Who
correct.
is seeing this data? The standard
Yes,
needs that
correct.
most enterprises care about.
Yes,
Uh, and as we're moving through this journey, these needs are not going away. In fact, they're
yeah,
going to be there even in the agentic
correct.
uh, needs or softwares that we built,
That is
essentially,
true.
right?
Amazing. All right.
Latency is important in voice
Yeah.
processes and so on.
All of these. In fact, talking about latency, I just saw ChatGPT came up
Yeah,
with GPT real time, which is just absolutely amazing. It's all real time, voice activated, and you can
yeah,
sing to it and tell it to respond in a
yeah,
melodic voice. Even remembers the genre of the songs, it knows the next line. So it's pretty phenomenal what
yeah,
GPT real time does. So it's real time voice as an input. So with that, we're going to go to organizational issues and then we wrap it up.
yeah. Now, this is a clearly a very important topic because what is happening is while the startups and the ecosystem wants to move fast, the other side of the reality is the enterprises are not cut to move fast.
Yeah.
So what is happening is a lot of the products that are being built are not picking up the messiness that the enterprises have,
Mm.
and they rightly need to be addressed if the enterprises have to take on this agentic journey.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, clearly, if you're a funded startup, you want to move fast, and the pace at which enterprises want to move has been a bit of a challenge, and therefore you see adoption in enterprises lagging the actual agentic hype
Yeah.
beyond the coding specific issues, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, these are not new. We have seen this in the cloud era, all of that. So while enterprises want agents, uh, their ability to attract some of these startups, some of these enterprises to, let's say, to work for them has sort of become a little bit of an issue here because of the pace at which these guys want to move and the pace mismatch, right? So that is one part of the issue. The other part of the issue is clearly all of this is because you many of them don't have strategy, don't have right set of investments, moving slow, doing one use case at a time, mostly in pilot or experimentation phase, right? So there's a need to calibrate speed and scale when you put this whole thing on a much more strategic canvas
Yeah.
than operational canvas,
Yeah.
right? So that is one. There is clearly people process skill gap here, right? They need to look at their skill inventory and see how can they address the gap. Do they need to bring in people from outside? Do they need to retrain people? Do they need to partner with startups who are ahead in the journey, right? All of those are the issues that need to be talked about, addressed if they want to get on uh, with the agentic journey seriously. The change management is important because this is going to displace some set of people or maybe if they note displays, they're going to take away some set of task and people and
Yes.
agents work
Yeah.
together,
Yes.
right? So how is the change management actually going to be done, right? We talked about other pieces of the whole thing where the agents need to be monitored. So how would the organizations build this new process around building the supervisory layer for agents or as well, for example, because there are going to be roles to do that, or there needs to be roles to do that, right? And then the technology itself, what is the strategy? Are you going to build all in-house? You're going to build some part in-house or build like what we went through, IS, PaaS, and
Mm-hmm.
SaaS.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have another layer, which is agents as a service, right? So the build versus buy versus partner or some combination of that. There needs to be a lot of clarity here for enterprises to actually start taking on the agentic journey. The journey has its own technical issues, like we talked about, but they're not just the only ones. I think this is a major sort of a second half, which is hampering the actual success with agents. That I think the one that you talked about at MIT or the Gartner thing, I would say a lot of it also has to do with this part of the story, which is that you've not got your the regular Slack out in some ways.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Okay. So, final slide. What should we do?
Yeah, so I think we completed with issues, and the first thing is uh, a clear strategy articulation is the first good step. Execution, what am I doing next 12 months, and where do I want to be in 3 years, has to be very
Mm.
clear, because that will trigger a set of actions, roles, inventory, skill gap, all of that are execution steps that you would go after. Build versus buy that we talked about, right? Then there's a technical thing, mind the context gap. We talked about this issue as well, which is the agents have to go to work, they need to be given right context, so on and so forth. How have you actually looked at what is your data today? It was built for humans earlier. Humans are good at filtering, but how are you going to then supply it to the agents who do not have the same level of capability? So, how do you reduce the friction to take the same data to agents, uh, and therefore they can give the same output that the humans give today? By the way, you and I wrote about task and process agents long back,
Yeah.
before the role agents, right?
Right.
So the current state is that you want to be focusing on task specific and process specific agents and get them right, right? And so you're going to define them narrowly. You're going to define them for the TCO, but even those will need some of these pieces, right? The last is clearly defining, deploying, and improving agents, right? So we're saying start with the simpler tasks, but make sure that the TCOs are clear, output expectations are clear, right? Have clarity on build versus buy, scale, all of that,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. Very nice. Yeah, this has been absolutely amazing. I think this is a really good pulse check on where we are. Thank you so much for taking time, and thanks viewers for staying with us. There's so much more that's going on. Rajesh actually is being like super deep in this space, and so hopefully we will do another one soon, and we'll talk about some of these issues. So with that, we'll stop here. Until next time, thank you so much. We'll talk again. Bye bye.